Let's talk about The Giving Tree, a book so controversial some parents didn't want it in classrooms. Marketed as a simple children's story, it holds a hidden meaning that many adults are only now beginning to recognize. That's right, this beloved bedtime tale has a dark side. But what makes it so unsettling? And why has it sparked so much debate? Shel Silverstein had already made a name for himself as a cartoonist and songwriter when he forayed into writing controversial children's literature. Certainly, the goal wasn't to be controversial, but to portray the real world as much as he could. But Silverstein soon became known for his unconventional and, honestly, melancholic storytelling style, and this was one of the many reasons The Giving Tree received mixed reviews upon its release in the early 1960s. While some readers saw it as a wonderful, touching tale of selfless love, others saw it for what it is, a troubling depiction of one-sided sacrifice. But don't get me wrong, the book does touch upon selfless or unconditional love. In fact, it's one of the more widespread interpretations, especially for kids. But if you take a closer look, will you still think Silverstein wrote this as a beautiful love story? The answer is no. The Giving Tree is a short picture book that tells the story of a lifelong relationship between a boy and a tree. In the beginning, the boy finds a tree that seems to have a fondness for him. They initially have a mutually beneficial relationship as the boy grows and plays in the shade of the tree, and the tree loves the boy and enjoys his company. However, as the book progresses, the dynamic shifts. The boy becomes demanding, not valuing the tree, but instead asking what the tree can do for him. Despite this, the tree doesn't relent, giving a piece of herself until she is literally nothing but a stump. Interestingly, Silverstein details each time that despite her sacrifices, the tree was happy. The story ends on a positive note, as the boy, who is now an elderly man, realizes that all he wants is a quiet place to sit and rest. Fortunately for the two of them, the stump of the tree provides a perfect spot to do so, and the tree is still happy. That tree's definitely a better person than I am. This is probably why one of the most widespread interpretations of the book is selfless love. Why so? Well, because selflessness is the quality of being willing to put others' needs before one's own, often at the expense of one's own desires, interests, or well-being. Basically, it's when you sacrifice your own self-interest for the benefit of others without expecting anything in return. Generally, it's a pretty virtuous trait to have, just like the tree does. And what better way to instill this virtue of selflessness in children than allegory? But if the book merely teaches kids to be selfless, why were parents so against it? Why do some parents still want it out of their kids' classrooms? We'll find our answers in the more controversial adult interpretations of the book. One of which is that it doesn't just teach selflessness, but also presents a deeply one-sided dynamic that some interpret as unhealthy. How so? Take a look at it from this perspective. The tree gives everything, expecting nothing in return, while the boy takes without gratitude or remorse. If we are being honest, this isn't the kind of selflessness parents would want their kids to learn. They, in fact, worried that this could send the wrong message to children, encouraging self-sacrifice to the point of self-destruction. And nobody wants that. Well, except the tree. But I digress. Critics go on to argue that the story normalizes an unbalanced relationship, one that could be read as endorsing toxic selflessness, which is a term that describes a situation where giving endlessly even to one's own detriment is seen as virtuous. Some feminist and psychological interpretations even compare it to unhealthy power dynamics in relationships, where one person gives until they have nothing left. As a result of these concerns, some parents did not and still do not want The Giving Tree in classrooms. In fact, some even called for the book to be banned, and who can blame them? If we take a look at the book from a feminist lens, it's even more jarring as the perspective offers new insights. Some feminist interpretations see the tree as a symbol of traditional femininity, expected to nurture, give, and never ask for anything in return. The boy's relentless taking mirrors patriarchal dynamics where women's labor and sacrifices are often unacknowledged. But beyond that, some see this story as a stark reflection of an even larger problem: humanity's relationship with nature. Judging from a man versus nature perspective, some adults have theorized that The Giving Tree can be interpreted as an allegory for humanity's relationship with the natural world, one defined by relentless consumption and unsustainable exploitation. And there might be a point to this, especially with the recent developments in the climate. The boy's interactions with the tree mirror the way humans take from nature without considering the long-term consequences. At first, the relationship seems harmonious and symbiotic. The boy enjoys the tree's shade, swings from its branches, and eats his apples. This early stage represents a time when humans lived in relative balance with nature, taking what they needed without causing significant harm. However, as the boy grows older, his needs become more demanding. He takes the apples to sell for money, the branches to build a house, and eventually the trunk to make a boat. Each step is a clear metaphor for deforestation, industrialization, and human-driven environmental destruction. The tree gives everything until it is reduced to a mere stump. Much like how the natural world is depleted when exploited without regard for sustainability. Yet despite all the boy's taking, he is never truly satisfied. By the time he returns as an old man, he has nothing left but the tree's remains, just as humans may one day find themselves left with a barren earth if they continue to consume without replenishing. This interpretation transforms the story from a simple tale of selflessness to some sort of dystopia. However, others are not quite convinced. According to them, Silverstein wouldn't have wasted such a beautiful piece on such a simplistic moral. Such people also argue that if Silverstein had intended for the story to be environmental, he would have made it more recognizable by making the tree decidedly less human. Agreed, this story might not be environmentally focused like Dr. Seuss's The Lorax. Nonetheless, it still works pretty well as a demonstration of how we should all collectively value and respect nature. The true interpretation of the book is up to the reader, especially since Silverstein never really gave his 2 cents on its hidden meaning. As for what influenced him to write it, he was also pretty tight-lipped on that. However, an interesting perspective is that some theories suggest that The Giving Tree was shaped by Silverstein's observations of human relationships, especially how people give and take, and who better to critique such actions than someone who was an active participant in the Korean War, a war where thousands lost their lives as a result of decisions made by those who never stepped onto the battlefield. The horrors of war aside, Silverstein was also a keen observer of life, love, and human nature, and he often explored themes of longing, generosity, and loneliness in his work. It's also why many believe that his free-spirited yet emotionally complex personal life played a role in the book's themes. He had relationships, but was never married. He had a daughter who sadly passed away at age 11, and he lived a rather unconventional life, moving between careers as a cartoonist, songwriter, and poet. As a result, some have chosen to interpret the book's dynamic between the boy and the tree as a metaphor for different relationships, between a parent and child, a romantic relationship, or even humanity's relationship with nature. We could spend all day debating the deeper meaning behind The Giving Tree, but there's one takeaway that doesn't need much discussion. The relationship between the tree and the boy is a cautionary tale about what not to do in life. If we look at the story from the boy's perspective, it's clear that taking advantage of others, even when they willingly allow it, is not something to be proud of. More mature readers quickly recognize the boy for what he is: selfish, ungrateful, and relentlessly self-serving. Yet none of these traits are explicitly stated in the book, and perhaps that's what makes the story so unsettling, because if we're honest, we have all been the boy at some point. Humanity has a long history of exploiting those who are needy, vulnerable, or too kind to say no, and Silverstein exposes this uncomfortable truth with a deceptively simple tale, reminding us to be grateful for what we receive and to think critically about how we acquire it. But while the book certainly warns against taking others for granted, the lesson that resonated most deeply with me is embodied by the tree itself. How so, you ask? Well, I see the tree and the boy as more than just characters. They represent a relationship, romantic, familial, or even a close friendship. At first, their bond is balanced. They love and serve each other, both benefiting from the connection. But as time passes, things take a dark turn. The boy begins to take, and the tree continues to give. What began as a mutual affection morphs into something painfully one-sided. Yet throughout all of this, Silverstein repeatedly states, and the tree was happy. That is, until the end, when, after giving away her apples, her branches, and even her trunk, the tree is reduced to a mere stump. Then comes the heartbreaking line, and the tree was happy. But was she really? That final line does something to me. It hits like a punch to the gut because it's almost as if the tree, after all those years of sacrifice, finally recognizes the truth. The relationship was never what she thought it was. She was never truly happy. She had mistaken her self-sacrifice for love, and by the time she realized it, there was nothing left of her. And that, at least to me, is one of the most important lessons hidden within this book. We often hear that love is blind, and while that phrase can be used positively to suggest that love transcends superficial concerns, we've all seen its darker side play out in real life. People, whether in romantic relationships, friendships, or even family dynamics, can become blind to the truth that they are giving endlessly to someone who does not value them in return. They convince themselves that things will get better, that the person they love will change, and that their sacrifices will eventually be acknowledged. But let's be real, often that day never comes. Instead, the giver gives and gives, clinging to a fragile hope until they, like the tree, have nothing left to give at all. And what's worse, even when people recognize the toxic nature of these relationships, they often return to them anyway. That's why many refuse to label the ending of the book as positive, because the reality is that it isn't. The way I see it, the tree, after everything, still allows herself to be used, as the boy, now an old man, returns with no apologies, no remorse, no real appreciation. And what does the tree do? She lets him rest on her remains. Like I said earlier, that tree's a better person than I am, because I definitely won't let that ungrateful boy sit on what I have left. But how many of us have been the boy? How many times have we returned to someone who drained us simply because we didn't know where else to go? It's easy to convince ourselves that no one else will love us the same way, or that things will eventually improve. And that's how we become the tree, stuck in a loop of giving, and giving, refusing to acknowledge that the person we are giving to stopped appreciating us long ago. Therefore, Silverstein's message is painfully clear. Don't be the boy. Don't take advantage of those who love you. But perhaps even more importantly, don't be the tree. Don't allow yourself to be used, even when you've convinced yourself that your sacrifice makes you happy. So let the giving tree be a lesson, not just in gratitude, but in self-worth. And how do you not become like the tree or the boy? Set boundaries. Establish clear limits to maintain your own well-being. Prioritize self-care by ensuring you're taking care of your physical, emotional, and mental needs. And always reflect on your motivations. Examine your reasons for practicing selflessness to ensure they align with your values and promote healthy relationships. Finally, as one netizen says, the difficulty that is presented by this story is finding some sort of positive moral value within a story that is decidedly not positive. In the end, Silverstein himself never explained the true meaning behind the book, leaving it all up to various interpretations. In essence, whatever moral lesson or deeper meaning you find that resonates with you is yours to keep. What deeper meaning does the book hold for you? Tell us in the comments. Also, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.